Edinburgh. It's shocking, isn't it, when you look at their staff not knowing where prisoners are, some of them locked in their own offices, allegedly because they didn't want to get distracted by prisoners, which you sort of feel would be the point of them being there, and inmates too scared to leave their cells. How did it get so bad before any measures were taken?
So you're right, it is absolutely shocking. I visited directly last week and saw a lot of this firsthand. The Secretary of State has visited, the Chief Executive of Prisons has visited. The two main drivers of this were that there was a riot in Birmingham prison 18 months ago, and it's clear that the prison never fully recovered from that. They brought in a new team, they tried to stabilise. The Inspector of Prisons himself 18 months ago felt that things were turning around, but you're absolutely right. And the other thing along with the riot has been new psychoactive substances, new types of drugs, which are causing very bad aggressive behaviour, which is why we're taking the unprecedented step of directly stepping in as the government.
Mr Stewart, I wasn't here last week, but what astonishes me about your admission just then is that you visited HMP Birmingham last week, and yet you were on Good Morning Britain last Friday talking about a £10 million government fund to basically improve certain prisons. The first question the people watching this programme this morning want you to answer is, why didn't you mention that on Friday when you were talking about a £10 million fund? Why didn't you do that? Was that good news and bad news to follow? Is that what government ministers do?
Jeremy, the answer is that we were bringing together a completely unprecedented step. So we were having to negotiate with G4S on Friday in order to get the government stepping in at no cost to the taxpayer. It's something we've never done before. It's something we had to do sensitively because it's commercially sensitive. But this is part not of a good news story, and this is true of the 10 prisons too. These are very, very seriously compromised places, which is why that approach I was laying out on Friday, focusing above all on sorting out violence, is going to be the key, not just to turning around Birmingham, but the rest of the estate.
OK, I'll take that. One final question from me, and you answered that very honestly, and I accept that. Again, people tuning into Good Morning Britain this morning are going to say, privately run by G4S. G4S this morning say, we welcome the government stepping in. We're going to step back for 6 months. Mr Stewart, you're surely going to tell me and the people watching this that you're not going to pay G4S for the next 6 months. In fact, shouldn't they give back the money to the taxpayer that's been spent on them providing such an appalling service?
So, Jeremy, at the moment, G4S are accommodating over 1,000 prisoners. We're going to step in. We're going to reduce the number of prisoners. We're going to bring in our own management team. All of that, I can assure you, will be at absolutely no cost to the taxpayer.
What's going to happen to the prisons that you're moving out of this prison?
We'll move them into other prisons within our estate, where we'll put small numbers of prisons into prisons under strong governors where they can be properly looked after, while we get into Birmingham, take some of those wings out of operation and make sure we tackle those basic issues of decency and violence in order to turn that prison around.
But aren't those prisons already overcrowded anyway? And you discovered this on the inspection. What's to say that there aren't other prisons in this kind of state? Are you confident that Birmingham is a one-off?
So Birmingham is one of a group of prisons that are seriously challenged. It's probably the worst in the country, but I'm not pretending that we don't have many other challenged prisons, which is why I was talking on Friday about going into 10 of our most challenged prisons, such as Wormwood, Scrubs and Leeds, which have some similar issues, particularly around drugs and violence. The answer to this is getting the training right outside the cell doors, day in, day out. We've put in nearly £40 million of investment. But you're absolutely right, too, that we need to make sure that as we move these prisoners out of Birmingham, we bring them into stable, well-run prisons so they can be properly accommodated.
Look, we talk a lot to prison officers, former prison officers and current prison officers, and they always say it's very simple. Prisons are underfunded, they're understaffed, they're at breaking point. The first thing you've done is put more money in and taken out reduce the number of prisoners they're dealing with. Surely if that was the case at all the prisons, it would be better off. Why wouldn't you just give more money and more staff a long time ago? These prison officers have been saying this for years.
So there is a challenge around staff, and we have brought in 2,500 extra staff. That's in addition to the existing prison officers. And that will make a huge difference because it allows those prison officers, for example, to be able to work on a 1-to-6 ratio, developing relationships with prisoners. But it isn't just about the money. A lot of this is also about these new drugs and the way in which you take a new approach out there on the landings at challenging violence consistently day in, day out.
Mr. Stewart, you could argue, and it's the last question, I mean, you can argue this whole debate about is this symptomatic of what's wrong with the privatisation of jails? I'm just going to finish this morning with Nathaniel Dapper, who was an ex-gang member who was on not half an hour ago in Good Morning Britain, and he said something that for me resonated, and I think people watching this morning will go, my goodness. He said the problem is prison isn't a deterrent anymore. That, to you, as the Minister of Prisons, must be a horrible, horrible thing to hear.
That is a horrible thing to hear. Prisons are very, very challenging environments. I don't think anybody reading that report on Birmingham is going to feel that prison is a comfortable place to go. But you're right, and your gang member who was interviewed may be an example of this. There are some people in this country who come maybe from such troubled or challenged backgrounds that they don't find prison the deterrent that it should be, which is why we need to work with them in every single way to turn their lives around, because that's the way that we're going to protect the public. That's education, that's work, but yes, there also is an element of punishment here, which needs to be clear about what we do with people who commit crimes.
Rory Stewart, Minister for Prisons, thank you very much indeed. You speak